Hey kids, let's talk about the good old days growing up in Idaho. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Growing Up in Idaho, talking about the good old days. So in today's episode, we've got some more good police stories, but to start out, I wanted to tell a little story about when I was about 4 years old and living in Boise, and I want to help you understand what it's like for a little kid who has a dad who's a police officer. For me, that was kind of scary. I knew that my dad was out on the road at night as a patrolman in the city, and he had to deal with bad guys. That's about the extent of my understanding. And I was worried about him. I was worried that he wouldn't come home in the morning like he always did. I was worried that the bad guys might do something harmful to him or kill him. But there's a lot of other things. One of them is the fact that there's guns in the house. Back in the mid-1960s, I'm pretty sure everybody owned a gun, at least a pistol or a rifle, maybe even a small rifle. So concerning guns, things are different today than they were back in those days. So I wanted to start off with a story about when I was around 4 years old, a little experience I had with Dad's police gun. Here we go. Saturday morning was sacred. Cartoons, the driving force behind my weekend well-being, came on at 5:30 a.m. That means that Mikey and I turned the TV on at 5 o'clock a.m., and watched the test pattern on the TV screen for 30 minutes or so. We were adamant that we not miss one single minute of cartoons. If you don't understand what a test pattern is, it's an old-fashioned thing. During the early days of television, channels did not run 24 hours a day. Channels went off the air at around midnight each day. So while a channel was off the air, the station would post a test pattern on the screen. So when you turned your TV on at the beginning of the day, you could adjust the picture to suit your viewing needs. Automatic television adjustments were not available in those days. So I liked to watch Scooby-Doo, the Roadrunner, the Pink Panther, Speed Buggy, and Bugs Bunny. I wanted to help Coyote kill the Roadrunner and solve all his problems. I loved to watch him open those crates from Acme, because invariably they contain some really cool stuff, like rocket suits and explosives, and other things that might kill a bird that could run really fast. One morning, after getting home from a long night shift patrolling the dark streets of Boise as a sheriff's deputy, Dad threw his gun belt down on the big brown chair in the living room. Then he stumbled off to bed in a daze and forgot to take his gun with him. I quickly recognized my chance to assist Coyote. Pulling Dad's pistol, which was a .357 Magnum, from its holster, I aimed it at the Roadrunner. Coyote was going to be really happy when I killed Roadrunner with Dad's police gun. I pulled on the trigger with all my might. I could see the hammer come back, and I figured it had something to do with making this gun work. What I didn't plan on was that dang Mikey going in and telling on me. Suddenly, looking sleepy but very alert, Dad appeared in his underwear. He deftly took the gun out of my hands and told me I should never take his gun out of the holster again, unless he was with me. He said I could shoot it when I was a bit older. A few years later, I got my chance. Dad taught me to respect guns. He kept that loaded .357 in a drawer by his bed for years after he left police work and became a school teacher in Salmon. I knew why he kept that loaded gun by his bed. It was because there were a lot of hippies he helped send to prison. One day they would get out, and he counted on them having long memories.
Yeah, a little kid. He was same age as your brother Mike, actually.
Uh-huh.
And that was when Mike was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
No, he was younger than that. He was about, I guess he was about 7 or 8. And this kid, they lived out on Hill Road, and and Hill Road. The reason they call it Hill Road is because it runs along the bottom of the foothills out west of Boise,
Yeah.
and they had a steep asphalt driveway that went down onto Hill Road. Hill Road is a pretty busy road. It's a commuter road where a lot of people were coming and going all the time on it. And Kelly, his name was Kelly Mincer. Kelly had a little scooter, and he'd sit on that scooter and he'd go rolling down that driveway. And just before he got to the Hill Road, he'd put his feet out and stop himself. And then he'd drag his scooter back up to the top of the hill and do it again.
Yeah.
And his mother saw him doing it, and she yelled out there at him 2 or 3 times and told him to quit doing that. Don't do that. That's dangerous, and so on. And he didn't quit doing it. He kept doing it because it was fun, you know.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I was coming down Hill Road going toward the west, and remember now, the sun sets in the west.
Right.
And it was about 5:36 in the evening. And there's a car right in front of me, you know, safe distance ahead of me. We were both traveling west, and this little kid come shooting out of that steep driveway on his scooter right in front of that car.
Wow.
I think I had no chance of stopping in time. And he ran over Kelly. And, of course, the guy was just beside himself. But if you got to have a witness for something like that, you couldn't ask for a better witness than a police officer.
Oh, yeah.
I saw what had happened. Anyway, we were giving Kelly first aid. He was something underneath the car snagged him and tore part of his head off, and just barely alive. And ambulance got there and hauled him away, and he died in the hospital. He died in the ambulance, I guess, on the way to the hospital. And a couple of sad things about that whole scenario. The poor guy that had run over him, it was after supper, and he just went out for a little ride to relax. And at supper time, he'd had a glass of wine, so he had a little bit of alcohol on his breath. And I smelled that alcohol, and I gave him all kinds of sobriety tests. And he said, "Do we have to do this now?" And he was just, but you know, the guy was just tore apart from what he'd done.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, we have to, because somebody's going to try to sue you. And I want to be able to testify in court that you're not drunk. So we have to do this. Sorry, but we have to do it."
Yeah.
And the other thing that I learned, his mother was standing there wringing her hands and sobbing and carrying on. She said, "I told him 5 or 6 times to quit doing that." And I thought to myself, you know, telling a little kid to do something and making him mind is 2 different things. And you will remember, Jeff, when you were kids growing up, we'd tell you to do things, but if it was important enough to make sure you did them, I always made sure you obeyed. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I remember you using that story as an object lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, it stuck with me. So, Dad, one more question. As a police officer in the 60s, you were kind of a first responder on accidents and things like that, weren't you?
Yeah, that's because I was a patrolman out on the road on my patrol car, and if something happened, whatever it may have been, in my patrol area, I'd be the first one to get there.
Right.
And that happened a lot of times with car wrecks and family fights and drunken brawls and fist fights in bars and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had plenty of experience with those kinds of exciting issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have to do, a lot of times you wouldn't have backup because they'd be too far away. And,
yeah, if somebody's life's in danger, I don't know how they do it nowadays, but in those days, the nearest help might be 15 minutes away.
Right.
Or even longer. And you know, if somebody's life is in danger, you got to step in and take care of things.
Yeah.
And you may not have time to wait for some help to get there. You got to grit your teeth and go for it. But just another little side note real quick one on this Kelly Mincer thing. sure enough, about a year after Kelly's death, here come a couple of attorneys wanting to see my police reports and talk to me.
Yeah.
His mother had hired some attorneys, and they were going to sue this guy. He owned a radio station down there. He was pretty well off.
Yeah.
They were going to sue him for running over Kelly. And I pulled out all the sobriety test results and everything else and showed them to him. I said, I knew that this would happen. And I will testify in court that this man was not drunk. He was not under the influence. So they dropped the case and never sued the guy.
Yeah.
And that's because of good police work, I have to say. The story that comes to my mind right now is the time that the last time you recorded some of my stories, I mentioned that a person had only pulled a gun on me once, but that isn't true. I'd forgot about the time that a guy named Lou Bertasso pulled a gun.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to. Anyway, let me tell you the story. You ready?
Yeah.
I was out patrolling in my patrol car, and I got a call from the office, and it said to go immediately to a phone and call in on the phone rather than on the radio. And occasionally they would do that on some circumstances because a lot of people have police monitors, and they listen to things, and they hear a really serious call come in, and they jump in their car and race over there because they want to see the excitement. And so that's not a good thing. If it's a matter of life and death, they go ahead and use the radio because it's quicker. But if it's not quite a matter of life and death, they sometimes would do that in those days.
Right.
Well, anyway, I called in on the phone, and Desk Sergeant Ted Dykus told me that on 5 Mile Road, this guy his wife and he were getting a divorce, and he had went to the house, and she'd got a restraining order to keep him away because he had a tendency to be violent and slap her around. Anyway, he went to the house with this restraining order against him and went in the house and chased her out. She was over at the neighbors making this phone call. And because of the restraining order, that gives the police authority to go and get him and arrest him and take him to jail. So I got in my car and went to this address on 5 Mile Road, and when I pulled up, I didn't stop in front of the house. Something told me not to. I pulled into the neighbor's driveway, which was just, right there.
Yeah.
And then another officer, Dave Rowe, was coming behind me in his car. He pulled up and stopped in front of the house. Well, this guy was crazy mad, and he came out of his house with a rifle in his hands, and he pulled that rifle down and aimed it at Dave Rowe, who hadn't even had time to get out of his car yet. And I realized that the guy with the gun hadn't seen me. All he had to do to see me was turn his head in my direction, but he was too busy watching Dave Rowe in his police car. He was yelling and screaming and cussing how I was going to kill him and nobody was going to take him and yakety-yak. And when I realized that he hadn't seen me yet, we had 12-gauge shotguns loaded with double-aught buckshot. And double-aught buckshot is 9 22-size slugs that come at you all at once.
Uh-huh.
That's what double-aught buck is in a 12-gauge shotgun. Well, I got the shotgun. It's mounted on a bracket on the dashboard, and I pulled it out, got out of the car, and I have to remember now, I was just a young kid. I was only about 23, and I figured, all I have to do is display that I have this shotgun here and tell him to drop his, and he will. And I learned in a hurry that isn't always the case.
Right.
And so I did. I got about probably 30 feet from him off to his left side. Still hadn't seen me. there. And I hollered at him and said, "Okay, drop your rifle." And he turned, he looked over at me then, and he didn't drop his rifle. He pulled up and aimed it right square at me. And I pulled my shotgun up and aimed it right at his chest. And I'd already had it levered and cocked. And I was squeezing one off. And you know how when you shoot a gun, you take up this little tiny bit of slack in the trigger, and then you're squeezing it, and it's going to go off any moment.
Right.
Anyway, the shotgun didn't go off. Lou Bertasso whirled and run back in the house. And while he was in the house, I got quite a bit closer, and he came back out on the porch again. Same scenario all over again. He realized I was there, and by the time he came back out, why, Dave Rowe got out of his police car and was standing behind his car to use it for some protection with this maniac with the rifle. And by then I was probably 10, 12 feet from this guy, and he was up on a 3-step porch, and just a concrete steps,
Yeah.
no porch railing or anything like that, just an open porch steps. Anyway, same thing happened again. He pulled that gun down on me, and I pulled up on him and was squeezing one off. And before it went off, Dave Rowe let out a big scream, and that startled this guy a little bit. He lowered his gun down, and he turned his head back toward Dave Rowe, and that gave me the opening that I needed. And I pulled some mace out and sprayed it in his face. And he was so angry and mad that it didn't really do anything except blind him. It didn't knock him down like it usually did in those days. It's pretty powerful stuff. It would knock most people right off their feet. And it didn't him, but it did blind him, and he couldn't see. And he grabbed his rifle by the barrel and using it like a ball bat. He was swinging it in my direction, hoping it could hit me, I guess. But remember now, he was 3 steps higher on this landing than I was. So I was able to just step up under his arms and give him a horizontal butt stroke on the side of the head with the butt of my shotgun. And his arms flew up in the air, and he went flying off the porch. And as his arms flew up, I grabbed his rifle, and he fell down in the flower beds. And Dave Rowe, by that time, had run over there and jumped on top of him, rolled him over, and handcuffed him. And we hauled him off to jail. And 2 interesting things that I'll never forget the rest of my life in that incident. The first one was, the Lord didn't want me to kill anybody, because he should have been dead. You know, you shot guns a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You take up the slack in the trigger, and that gun's going to go off.
Yep.
For whatever reason, twice that happened within 10 seconds or so. That shotgun didn't go off. If it had, it would have splashed him across the front of his house.
Yeah.
12-gauge shotgun with double-aught buck is a pretty formidable weapon. And the other thing that I learned that I had to know was that, yes, I could kill somebody if I had to in the line of duty. Every policeman has to know that. If he doesn't know that, or if he doubts that he can do that, he should not be a policeman.
Thanks for listening. Growing up in Idaho, the good old days.